We're going to colonize space. Humanity is going to spread out across the galaxy. And I listen to them and I think, well, maybe they're right. Maybe we will do all those things. But I think what's happened is we've become very good at dreaming and not so careful about looking at what's really true. So, let me ask you a simple question. What does it actually take to leave Earth? Now, when I say that, I don't mean the romantic notion. I don't mean the idea that we'll do it someday because we're clever. I mean, what are the actual physical engineering problems that stand between us and spreading out into space? And when you really look at those problems, when you don't pretend they're easier than they are, you realize something interesting. We are quite literally trapped here. Let me be more careful about what I mean by trapped. I don't mean we can never send people to space. We've done that. We've sent people to the moon. But there's a difference between visiting somewhere and living there. There's a difference between a brief excursion and actually being able to survive and build a civilization somewhere else. And when you look at that difference, that's where the real problems appear. The first thing to understand is that Earth is a very special place. Now, that sounds obvious, but most people don't really think about what that means technically. We live in one atmosphere of pressure. We live with one gravity. We live inside a magnetic field that protects us from radiation. And we live surrounded by an atmosphere that shields us from ultraviolet light and cosmic rays. These aren't just nice features. These are absolutely essential things that keep us alive every single day, and we don't even notice them. Now, when you leave Earth and you want to go somewhere else, let's say you want to go to Mars, which is what everybody talks about, you have to do something very interesting. You have to bring all of these things with you, or you have to find them where you're going. And that turns out to be much harder than people think. Let me start with something simple. Gravity. Human beings are built for Earth gravity. Our bones are built for Earth gravity. Our muscles are built for Earth gravity. Our cardiovascular system, the way our hearts pump blood and keep pressure in our vessels, all of that is built for Earth gravity. Now, what happens when you take that system and you put it somewhere with no gravity at all, or much less gravity? The astronauts on the International Space Station, they're only 400 kilometers up, so they're still close to Earth, but they're in what we call microgravity. And what happens to them? Their bones start to lose density. In just 1 month in space, their skeleton begins to lose minerals. They lose 1 to 1.5% of their bone mineral density every month they're up there. Over a year, that's significant loss. Their muscles atrophy. They lose muscle mass even though they exercise for 2 hours every single day. 2 hours. They're doing resistance training, treadmills, everything they can think of, and they still lose muscle. Now, Mars has some gravity. It's about 38% of Earth's gravity. That's better than nothing. But we don't actually know if it's enough. We don't know if the human body can maintain itself long-term at Mars gravity. We haven't tested it. We haven't had people living on Mars. So, we're in a funny position. We might build a spacecraft to get people there, and then discover that their bodies don't actually work there. There's another option, of course, artificial gravity. You can spin a spacecraft, and the centrifugal force will push people toward the outside wall, and that can simulate gravity. This is something people have thought about for a long time. But do you know what that requires? It requires a very large spacecraft, a very large, expensive spacecraft. If you want to simulate Earth gravity with rotation, the thing has to be big. And the bigger it is, the more fuel you need to get it off the ground, the more material you need to build it. The engineering challenges multiply. But let's say we solve that somehow. Let's say we build these rotating habitats and we get them to Mars. We've still got another problem. And this one is very serious radiation. Now, here's what I want you to understand about radiation in space. Earth has a magnetic field. The sun emits radiation all the time, and Earth's magnetic field deflects a lot of it. Up here in our atmosphere, there's all this stuff being absorbed. It's being scattered. It's being blocked. But once you leave Earth and you're traveling through space, you're exposed to galactic cosmic rays. These are high-energy particles coming from all over the galaxy. They're coming at you continuously. An astronaut on Earth receives about 2.5 millisieverts of radiation per year. That's our normal background radiation. A mission to Mars, a 3-year mission to Mars and back, that astronaut would receive 300 to 600 millisieverts of radiation. That's roughly 100 to 200 times what they'd get in a year on Earth over just 3 years. Now, what does that do? It increases your cancer risk significantly. It can damage your DNA in ways that terrestrial radiation doesn't. It can cause cataracts in your eyes. It can cause cardiovascular disease. And the problem is there's no really good solution to this. Shielding helps a little bit. But here's something interesting. If you shield too much, or if you use the wrong materials, you can actually make it worse. The radiation particles interact with your shield material and create secondary radiation, neutrons and pions that are even more damaging. So you're in a bind. You need shielding, but shielding adds weight. Weight requires more fuel. More fuel requires more weight to carry it. It's a vicious circle. And even with all the shielding you can reasonably add to a spacecraft, you're still going to get a significant radiation dose. You're still going to increase your cancer risk. Now, I want to pause here and tell you something important. This is the kind of thing that people don't like to talk about because it's not exciting. It's not dramatic. It's just a problem. But in engineering, these are the problems that matter. These are the ones that kill projects. I remember investigating the Challenger disaster. That was in 1986. Do you know what I found? I found that the engineers knew about the problems. They knew the O-rings were brittle in cold weather. They knew the risks, but there was a disconnect between what the engineers understood and what the managers wanted to believe. The managers had schedules. They had budgets. They had a space program to run, and the engineers' warnings didn't fit into that story. So, I wrote something in my report, and I want to tell you what it was because I think it applies directly to this discussion about space exploration. I said, for a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. That's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying to talk about what's real, not what's exciting. So let's keep going. Let's say we've got people to Mars. They're there. They're living in habitats or maybe in caves to shield from radiation. What do they eat? You need a closed-loop life support system. You can't just bring all your food from Earth. That would require too much weight. You need to grow food on Mars. But here's what nobody wants to talk about. We don't know how to do that yet. Not at any real scale. You need water. Mars has water ice, but it's frozen. And you need energy to extract it and purify it. You need soil or a growing medium. Martian soil is not like Earth soil. It's not alive. There are no microorganisms in it breaking down minerals so plants can use them. It's toxic in ways that are still not completely understood. You need light. Mars is farther from the sun than Earth. The sunlight is weaker. You probably need artificial lights to grow food. That requires a lot of energy. Where does that energy come from? Solar panels. You'd need a lot of them, and they get covered in dust. Wind power. It's a thin atmosphere. There's not much wind. Nuclear power, maybe. But now you're building a nuclear power plant on Mars. And even if you solve all of that, there's something else. The plants themselves. Studies have shown that radiation at the Martian surface reduces crop yield substantially. So your plants are getting bombarded with radiation while they're trying to grow, and they don't produce as much food. This is not theoretical. This has been measured. There's also the problem of isolation. Not just the psychological isolation, though that's real and serious. I mean, the physical isolation. You're millions of kilometers away from Earth. Communication takes 20 minutes one way. If someone gets sick, if there's a medical emergency, you can't call an ambulance. You can't get emergency surgery from Earth doctors. You're on your own. You have to have doctors there. You have to have medical equipment. And you have to be able to handle almost anything that comes up. And that brings me to another point. The closed environment itself is a problem. You've got a small group of people living in a sealed habitat. The air you're breathing has been recycled. The water you're drinking has been recycled. You're eating food that you grew in that same closed system. Any mistake, any contamination, any failure in the life support system, and you have a catastrophe and you're far from help. People say, but we're learning about closed ecosystems. We're studying them. Yes, we are. The International Space Station has taught us a lot. But the ISS is not a closed ecosystem. Supplies come up from Earth regularly. People rotate. There's constant resupply. On Mars, you can't do that. A resupply mission takes 6 months to get there. So, you can't have failures. You have to design systems that don't fail. And I'm telling you, that's harder than it sounds. Now, let me ask you something. Have we ever built a closed-loop life support system that's actually worked for years? Have we? We have robots that work for years on Mars, but they don't need to breathe. They don't need to eat. They don't need water to drink. A human being is not a robot. There's another thing I should mention, and it's embarrassing because it's so simple. The journey itself. Getting to Mars takes 6 months minimum. 6 months in a confined spacecraft with a small crew exposed to radiation and microgravity. Your muscles are atrophying the whole time. Your bones are losing density. Your heart has to work less because it's not working against gravity. So, your cardiovascular system is deconditioned. You arrive at Mars weaker than when you left. And then you have to work. You have to build things. You have to repair equipment. You have to do physical work in a spacesuit which is heavy and restrictive on a body that's been weakened by 6 months of microgravity. And it's not just the muscles. Your balance system has been disrupted. Your vision has changed. Fluid has shifted in your body. You're not the person you were when you left Earth. And then when you're ready to come back, you do it all over again. Another 6 months of radiation, isolation, and microgravity, and then you have to readapt to Earth gravity, which is its own ordeal. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's difficult, very difficult. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is because difficulty has a way of making dreams less appealing when you have to actually face it. Let me talk about the economics of this for a moment because I think this is important. How much would it cost to establish even a small human settlement on Mars? We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars, probably more than $1 trillion when you add up everything. The spacecraft, the habitats, the equipment, the supplies, the redundant systems, the rescue equipment, years of development decades before you had any kind of self-sustaining settlement. Now, where would that money come from? From governments. Governments have other priorities. They have roads to fix, schools to fund, medical systems to maintain. You're asking them to spend $1 trillion to put a few people on Mars. That's a very hard sell from private companies. A private company would need to make money somehow. How do you make money on Mars? What's the business model? You're not going to mine something valuable enough to justify the expense of getting it back to Earth. That doesn't make economic sense. You're not going to have tourists. The risk is too high. The cost is too high. So what's the revenue stream? And here's the thing about private companies. They're subject to pressure from shareholders and investors. If you're spending billions of dollars on a Mars program and the returns are years away, if they're even certain, that's hard to justify. It's easier to build something that makes money now. So, we're in a strange situation. Government funding for space is limited and getting more limited. Private companies can do amazing things, but they follow market incentives. And Mars doesn't follow market incentives. Now, let me address something people sometimes say. They say, but we didn't know we could fly in heavier than air machines either. Technology advances, we figure things out. That's true. We do figure things out. We've done remarkable things. But there's an important difference. The laws of physics limit what's possible. You can't violate conservation of energy. You can't get something for nothing. You can't shield completely from radiation without adding enormous weight. You can't create gravity without spinning or accelerating. These aren't engineering problems that clever engineers can solve. These are physics problems. And here's what's interesting. We've already solved many of them, at least in principle. We know how to create artificial gravity. We know how to shield from radiation. We know how to grow food. We know how to recycle water. We know all these things. But knowing how and actually doing it at the necessary scale with the necessary reliability and for the necessary cost, those are very different things. So what I'm saying is this. We are not trapped on Earth because we don't know how to leave. We're trapped here because the costs are enormous. The risks are severe. The engineering challenges are immense. And there's no clear economic benefit. And none of those things are going to change anytime soon. Maybe they'll change in 100 years. Maybe in 500 years, we'll have technology that makes this easier. But in any meaningful time frame for the foreseeable future, this is where humanity lives on Earth. Now, that doesn't mean space exploration is pointless. It's not. We learn from space exploration. We learn about ourselves. We learn about physics. We learn about engineering. Robots on Mars tell us about geology. The International Space Station helps us understand biology. These are valuable things, but we shouldn't fool ourselves about what's happening. We're not going to Mars to establish a self-sustaining human civilization in the next 50 years. We're not colonizing the moon. We're not spreading out across the solar system. What we're doing is exploring like explorers have always done. We send out expeditions. They come back. We learn things. And then we send out more expeditions. That's fine. That's a worthy goal. But it's different from what people often imagine. You know what I think the real issue is? I think the real issue is that people want there to be an escape hatch. They want to believe that if things go badly on Earth, well, we can always leave. We can always start over somewhere else. But that's not realistic. That's not going to happen. If we're going to survive as a species, if we're going to thrive as a species, we have to do it here on Earth with this one planet and these finite resources. So instead of thinking about how to leave, maybe we should be thinking about how to live here better, how to take care of the systems that keep us alive, how to manage our resources carefully, how to solve the problems that are actually facing us right now. Because those problems are real. Climate change is real. Resource depletion is real. Pollution is real. These are the things that threaten our existence, not asteroid impacts or some distant catastrophe that might happen in 1,000 years. These are problems we're dealing with now. And here's something else. All the technology we'd need to live on Mars, the closed-loop life support, the water recycling, the efficient food production, the renewable energy, all of that would be incredibly useful here on Earth, too. Instead of using it to escape to Mars, we could use it to live better, more sustainably right here. So, let me be very clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying space exploration is bad. I'm not saying it's a waste of money. I think it's fascinating. I think it's important. I think we should continue to do it. Send robots to Mars. Send people to the moon for research. Study the universe. Learn what we can. But let's be honest about what we're doing and what we're not doing. We're not leaving Earth. Not in any way that matters. We're still here, and we're going to stay here. So maybe we should focus on that. On making this planet work. On keeping the remarkable systems that keep us alive functioning properly. On solving the actual problems we face. Because that's where the real work is. That's where the real engineering challenge is. Not in escaping to some other world, but in learning to live on this one.